Well, that was really something. I'm back with Max Allen Collins, and we are going to talk about what we just saw, that incredibly depraved experience that is Born to Kill. Lawrence Tierney is kind of unique, don't you think, Max? I mean, he's an incredible presence on screen.
Well, he certainly is intimidating. He reminds me in his acting style a lot of George Raft, and he has that same quality of seeming like somebody who, if you got out of line with him in a bar, he'd slap you around a little bit. And that isn't true of every Hollywood actor. I don't think you think that of, say, Alan Ladd. But I don't think you'd want to mess with Lawrence Tierney. And people who did mess with Lawrence Tierney regretted it.
Yes. Yes, the tales are legendary. I've told some of them here on Noir Alley, but really kind of extraordinary that his career lasted as long as it did, given his propensity for barroom brawling and altercations with the law and all this. So I want to ask you, though, about, since you're a writer, about the writing of this, because you've mentioned to me that the book and the screenplay are somewhat different.
The screenplay is very faithful to the book, but it condenses it in a very smart way. For example, the Walter Slezak character replaces a character like his character, Private Eye, and a psychiatrist who's kind of like right out of Nightmare Alley. And that psychiatrist goes through the whole book and is kind of, taking advantage of people and swindling people. And the book, Deadlier Than the Mail, has probably another 8 strange, troubled, awful human beings that the author focuses on. And so the screenwriters really tightened it up and combined, and it really is an effective screenplay. One of the things that's really interesting to me is that the finish of the novel is even more bleak than the finish of the book, or excuse me, of the film, because in the film, Claire Trevor pays for her sins, as you have to in the Hollywood films of that era. But in the book, she survives. She is shot, but she survives, and she kind of hits on the EMT who's helping her out the door. So it makes the point that of the two characters, of the Lawrence Tierney character and the Claire Trevor character, Claire Trevor is the most dangerous. She is deadlier than the mail.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, exactly. That's why hence the title, the original title of the book. And you'll appreciate this, Max. When I showed this film and Lawrence Tierney was with me watching the film, Robert Wise was actually our guest that night. And my colleague Dennis Bartok did the interview with Robert Wise while I kind of babysat Lawrence Tierney. And at one point, yeah, which is that's a handful, trust me. But it was very interesting because at one point, Tierney got kind of upset that Wise was talking about motivations and things with the characters as though he wrote it. And Tierney actually bellowed out in the theater from the last row while Wise was speaking. He says, "Hey, Bob, who wrote the effing script?" And he knew it was Richard Macaulay and Eve Green were the two screenwriters. And Tierney knew their names and said everything was in the script, everything. It was a really, really great job. Those two did a beautiful adaptation. I mean, he knew this stuff. This was not a guy who just walked onto the set and said, what are my lines? I got to go get my next drink. I mean, he really did understand what he was doing, and he studied, and it shows in this performance.
You've got to know what you want in life. Be sure you're going to get it. You can't miss. I found that out early.
One of the things that's interesting about the book and thinking about what the screenwriters brought to their adaptation is that almost every scene in the film is in the book, but there's another, 25 scenes. So they had to have the smarts and the storytelling craft to go through and say, this is worth doing, this is extraneous, this is important. And they had a laser-like focus on what's important in the novel, to where when I read the novel, I'm thinking, this is like a 21-year-old kid who was when he wrote the book, just letting it go, just doing whatever comes into his mind. These are pros who are saying this has got to be a narrative that moves like a bullet, and it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Max, I want to thank you again for joining us. I hope we can maybe make this kind of a regular thing.
It was great being here. This has been an ambition of mine to join you on Noir Alley.
Now, here's the surprise for you, because I'm going to tease next week's show. I want everybody to come back and watch next week when I will be presenting the 1964 version of The Killers by Don Siegel, starring Lee Marvin and Clu Gulager and Angie Dickinson and John Cassavetes, which I know is a favorite of yours, Max, but the timing just didn't work out. So we'll have a private seminar about that one. But everybody else, make sure you tune in next week for that, where Ronald Reagan is the villain. How can you pass that up? Okay, see you next week, and until then, stay in the shadows.